Today we are at a location that I raced at last year, but I haven't actually ridden in over 5 years, and that is Hansen Hollows in Spragueville, Iowa. We're not alone for today's ride. Mike Snyder decided to tag along, which is awesome, and I was extremely excited for that because him and I have been trying to set up a time to ride, so we finally made it happen today, and he is going to help me explore around the property because this place has a lot of trails. Right next to the parking lot, we have this cool open field section. Generally, for the races, this is where they have the starts, and yeah, it has a little bit of everything here. We have the open field, we have some small hills, and also a few creek crossings, which we'll get to here a little bit later in the video. Moving to the woods, Mike and I are just getting warmed up here on what looks like some old race trails from the past few years. And actually, if you pay attention to the trees, you'll be able to see a few arrows. So, trying to just follow the old race trails, get warmed up. In this place, you kind of have to ease into things because there's a little bit of everything here. A lot of roots, a lot of rocks, and some difficult hills, which we try and tackle some hills later on in the ride here, but there's a reason this place had a hard enduro just recently. There's some difficult stuff. Now, Mikey and I don't really tackle any of the hard enduro stuff. At least I don't think we did. So, the way that I approached this ride was kind of a toss up for me at the start here. I wasn't sure if I should be practicing going over the technical stuff, so riding over the roots and the rocks, or if I should be practicing finding lines around those obstacles. So I wasn't really sure how to approach it, but I decided I want to practice getting over that type of terrain so it doesn't bog me down during races if I end up having to ride over it. So you'll notice that I'm going over all of the routes and I'm going over the rocks and riding up the rocks. That is on purpose. I decided that's what I want to practice. So for example, right here, I go straight over all these rocks. Mikey is finding lines around it, and that's just because I wanted to practice getting over that stuff. So right here is kind of a throwback. Back in 2016, Mike and I were racing here, and in this section we're riding over right now, Mike crashed and broke his collarbone, which sucks because he was in second place for the day, and also he was in a championship fight in the 98 to 200C class. So I talked to Mike and he said he just wanted to ride through that section again as redemption, which is fair. Now, that race was one of my better races I had, and I ended up finishing fourth of 12 in the 201 to Open C class. But yeah, that super interesting race. A number of people got hurt in the Open C class, and then a fair number of people just decided to pull off and not finish. But I ended up finishing, and it was an awesome day for me. So that was before I had the channel, so that is not on my YouTube channel, but good memories. So here Mike and I run into our first incident. We go up this hill completely blind, wasn't sure what to expect. Mike ends up falling down at the top of the hill here, so I kind of pull an audible and I go off to the left to try and make it up. So I make it up, I just burn out my clutch and I stalled my bike. Get it up and running, and now I'm trying to find a tree to park my bike on in order to go down and help Mike out a bit.
Good.
So here we can see how rocky it is at the top of this hill.
The thing about not knowing this place is you can see the bottom of the hill, but you don't know what the hell's at the top. There's nothing on the other side.
So Mike decides he wants to try and give this hill another shot, so I stay up at the top here as a spectator and also as any assistance that he may need if he gets hung up again. Right here, I thought he was going down, but he stayed on the gas and he ends up getting up the hill with very little issue the second time. So that was a nice attempt, Mike, and I walked back up the hill, get to my bike, and we go off to explore some more trails. So Mikey and I make our way to the creek section, which is extremely wet and muddy. This first obstacle that we come across here is just kind of a rock face. It looks more intimidating than what it actually is. Super simple to get up. Just gas it a little bit and the front tire just gets right up the face. So it looked intimidating, and with how muddy it was, it seemed a little sketchy, but it really wasn't that bad. Then there's another rock face right here. And then speaking of hiccups, we make our second one right up here. Mikey and I end up going a little too far up the creek and we end up getting it stuck. So we're trying to turn around. The problem is there are rocks and roots everywhere. So Mike ends up laying his bike over. I'm trying to figure out where I'm going to turn around. Now, in hindsight, I should have just backed my bike out, but for some reason I rode forward where Mikey was stuck. So not really the best decision, and you can see me struggling right now just because of the rocks and the roots that are all over the place. So this turned into an ordeal getting my bike turned around. Took two people, Mike and I, and a lot of effort. I cut out a lot of this just because it's painful to watch, but this was at least 5 minutes of trying to turn my bike around. Eventually, we get my bike to a point where I can try and just gas it up this small, it's not really a hill, just bump or whatever. This is basically the only chance I have of getting out of here. So I get
Alright,
unstuck.
now the
5 minutes
crazy bit after
later,
that,
that
bud.
sucked. So we get out of the creek. Fun stuff. So now that Mike and I are both completely exhausted, we end up tackling some of the tighter trails here at the top of one of the hills. You can tell we're both kind of just bogging it at this point. Here's one of those creek crossings I was talking about earlier in the field section. Nothing too difficult, but still cool. Saving the best instant for last, this one turned into an absolute mess. So, when it comes to hills and rocks, momentum is your friend, and momentum was definitely not my friend on this attempt. I had no chance of getting up this hill. I was bogging going up to the hill and then just started riding the clutch at the face. There was absolutely no way. Now the problem is the face for the hill is super steep and there's rocks everywhere. So I'm trying to get myself turned around here, and
Yeah,
in doing so, I end up wedging my front tire
I don't
against
think so.
that tree, and I wedge my rear tire against a rock. This wasn't fun.
Oh boy.
So Mike ends up giving us a hand here, and we eventually get myself unwedged and unstuck. However, through this whole ordeal, I am absolutely
I'm
exhausted.
just gonna walk it down. Okay. Well, now I'm.
Even though I'm
Okay.
exhausted, Mikey
Oh my
still
god.
somehow ends up talking me into giving this hill another attempt.
Middle.
So, with some momentum this time, let's see how we do. Oh boy, maybe a little bit too much momentum. Get a little squirrely towards the top of the
I'm
hard
gonna pop
stuff,
right and
and
get
a
up.
few of the rocks just
I
throw
think
me
I know
off
the
and make
plan.
me tip the bike over, but I feel like I got over the hard stuff, so I count it as a win. And once I get my bike going again, I just completely get up the hill. So, yeah, I count that as a win overall. A lot better than the first attempt for sure. So, at the top of the hill here,
I
Mike
found
and I
it.
are just talking, and this is where the GoPro ends up dying for the day.
I
We rode for about
felt
45 more minutes,
felt
so
my tires
we
kind
missed
of
a little
whipping
bit,
around for
but
a
we
second
captured
there.
a majority
The
of the
traction was
footage.
kind of
So,
pounding over the hard
overall,
stuff, and then
like I said, really fun day, really beneficial for me following Mike around,
so
exploring Hansen Hollows, and most of the trails this place has to offer. Actually, wouldn't even say most of the trails.
my tires
We
started
barely
popping.
even scratched a dent in this place. Definitely want to come back here though to explore some more and take on maybe a little bit more difficult stuff as well. Also, we need to make a few road trips to visit Mike for a few more rides as the year progresses.
Yeah.
So, I hope you all enjoyed this video, and I will see you on the next episode.